people have like say like a doorstop, like a front porch.
levels, sorry. So that would be anything from using timers or dimmers, motion sensors, or any other kind of technology that can be used with lighting. And then the lighting assessment tool is used, is a tool for leaders to, and not even leaders, it can be used for anybody really that has a house or anything, to consider your costs and benefits of current lighting as well as potential lighting that you could adapt to. So it's not anything that you would have to adapt to, it's just providing an option for changes you could implement possibly, and you can see that data and compare whether or not you will have any benefit in the long run cost-wise or in any sort of example. Next. So for the current lighting information in our spreadsheet, we got this information through a property walkthrough from somebody. I'm not exactly sure who, but we did get it from somebody. And you would gather the fixture information. There's usually a reference model on the side of your fixtures and light bulbs, and I circled them in those pictures. So it gives you like a lot of the information that you would need to put into this lighting assessment, and it'll help you get those totals at the end so you can see that benefit. And then for possible lighting alternatives, you can get this information just by researching online. The Dark Skies Association website, as you guys have heard by now, they have a list of retailers that they have approved, but there's just certain categories that you need to pay attention to when you're looking at fixtures and lighting to determine whether or not they fall under that Dark Skies friendly category, basically. You can also get consultants from commercial lighting companies if you one day develop a larger infrastructure and you don't need like 1 or 2 light posts, you need like 100 or 200. That is a good way for you guys to go. And then these attempts are made to align to those chosen sample fixtures according to those lighting ordinances. So these are just some of the components of the lighting analysis spreadsheet. Again, we'll be going over this in I think the next couple slides, but these are some of the components that we go over. So you will be comparing the cost-benefit analysis of current and proposal of lighting fixtures, the location of those lightings, whether or not the current space that lighting light fixture is, maybe it needs to be moved somewhere else. Then you also go over the bulb type and the temperature and the wattage, whether or not the hours of operations could be reformed to fit the needs of that space, and the kilowatt an hour cost for that lighting fixture, and then the annual operating cost for your current and then any proposed lighting fixtures that you may come up with. So you can compare that data, and then as well as whether or not it is in compliance with the ordinance policy. And then I think Tyler is doing this slide.
Do we have Tyler here with us? Well, I can take over here. And thank you, Lily. So yeah, essentially the idea of this tool that we're offering the community is something that is meant to help explore what various options are, or just be a tool for even cataloging and exploring what the current lighting on any sort of installation is. This could be done with private residences. It could also be done with commercial properties. As Lily mentioned, though, sometimes the lighting, if there is a choice to change lighting on a commercial property, sometimes the best route is to work with some of these companies that can advise more specifically to those types of purposes. So it's harder to get pricing information on some of that stuff without already being engaged with those consultants, which I'm making note of right now. We'll get into later. But basically, the idea of an assessment is to understand who, when, and why people are going to be using the space at night, and to try to style the lighting really directed in that way. Ultimately, that's kind of the hope, that all of those types of factors will be incorporated. What this tool does really focuses not so much on those components, but just on the economic analysis of these things. And so we have two sites that were explored here. One is the old elementary school, and here's a map that was generated from a lighting inventory done in 2018, and that's where we drew our information from, is that lighting inventory. So here's a map of where all the lights are around that property. And then the other property, which was offered up to us as an example, is this Cedar Shack Cafe, which is at the Bluff Dwellings Resort. And the next thing we're going to do is show the spreadsheet. And so I'm actually going to change my screen share here really quickly. I'll just give you 1 second to move to that. So one thing that I will just state at the beginning here is that we have these two properties, and oops, I'm not sure you all are seeing that. Is anybody seeing a spreadsheet on the screen?
Not really.
Okay. Let me stop presenting and then start presenting again. Okay. Is everyone seeing a spreadsheet now? Okay. So yeah, our original intention here was to fully develop a suite of recommendations, and unfortunately we as a group were not able to quite get that far. And so we have some examples, and if the person who offered the information about the Cedar Shack is here too listening, we will still be able to deliver some of that stuff in the coming weeks, just to, again, be an example for yourself and the community. But here, I just want to use what we have on the spreadsheet currently to sort of illustrate how this can be a tool for anybody who is thinking about altering the lighting on their property. And I'm actually going to start by talking about a light that I have on my own house here in Salt Lake, because that one we have kind of totally filled in, and it sort of demonstrates how this can work. So on my front porch currently, I have just an open socket with a bulb in it. And this is not really a dark sky compliant light because it's not shielded. And just an open bulb in a socket doesn't have any sort of directionality to it or anything. So it's generally considered like among the worst options, since it's casting light in all directions. It can be glary and stuff like that. It's at the front door. Currently it's a halogen bulb. It is a nice light temperature. It's a little bit warmer and not so blue. I have the current wattage here as 45. Right now it's on about half the day, about 12 hours. Here's the cost of electricity on average here in Salt Lake. And using all of these numbers on the spreadsheet, I'm able to calculate what the current annual operating cost is of this light. It's a little over $20. So it's not compliant because of that lack of shielding. And if I scroll over here to the right-hand side of the spreadsheet, there is a thing linked here. It's a recessed ceiling light made for outdoor applications that's available at Home Depot. So there's a link there to that. And so the one option that I could explore to make this light kind of more dark sky friendly would be to replace it with this recessed light. And the recessed lighting, kind of by definition, is generally fully shielded lighting, as long as the bulb itself goes all the way up into that canister. This could be installed in the ceiling of the porch, and it would also allow an opportunity to use a different type of bulb technology, in this case an LED, that is also a very low temperature. Something to watch out for with LEDs is that they can be quite high temperature, very blue light, but they are available in lower temperatures. Changing the fixture and the bulb allows me to achieve about the same amount of light, but more directed for a much lower wattage. And so if we take into account the wattage, the very cheap cost of this particular fixture, and also reducing the amount of time that fixture is in operation any given day, you can see here the new proposed annual operating cost is much lower than that $20. It actually would only cost me about $2.50 a year to run this light. And so I would recoup the cost of replacing that fixture, at least with the purchase of the fixture, in less than a year. And over 10 years, I would actually save a little over $150, almost $160. So that's an example of kind of how this tool is supposed to work. I'm just going to walk through one more example for the Bluff Old Elementary School, and hopefully this explanation will suffice for folks to kind of explore this further once we have this tool totally developed and delivered to you all. So if we look at some of the lights that are installed currently on the Bluff Elementary School on the wall, there are these wall packs, and currently they are a somewhat high temperature bulb, and they also, if we come over here, are only partially shielded. They're not fully shielded wall packs. Right now, their operating cost per year is about $8.26, and they're not currently compliant with the lighting ordinance because of both the bulb temperature and the partial shielding. So one option that could be explored, and this is a relatively cheap option among the ones that are available, are, I guess we don't have the link in here, but are some wall packs that are available at Home Depot. You said it's above, Lily?
It's row 4. It's the one above it, I think, that I had the link in.
Oh, yes, here we go. Okay. Yeah, so here's what that wall pack looks like, just in the mouse over there. Whether or not, you know, the town would choose to replace it with this exact light is really up to you guys, but this is just an example of something that would be about comparable in terms of the application, but is styled in a way so that it's totally full cutoff, and also has a reduced lighting temperature. And if we move over to the wattage and cost, we can then just kind of plug in the numbers there. A reduced wattage of 13, costs to purchase the fixture. This doesn't incorporate installation costs. And then the operating hours per day translates to an operating cost of about $3.98 per year. And in this case, you know, since the operating cost already is not very large, that means that it would take about 12 and a half years to recoup the cost, which is a little bit of time, but you're also, you know, achieving all of those other dark sky benefits. And then if you think of this over longer periods of time, it does start to add up into a cost savings. So that's our little tour of the lighting assessment tool. This is something that we can certainly develop a little bit more. And it's just a tool. The spreadsheet itself with the formulas plugged in is a tool that we will submit to the community for access on the town website. So I'm going to stop sharing again and move us to our last presentation. And I'm sorry we're going a little bit over the agenda time, but I think this last one is relatively short.
Yes, it will be.
So Hayden, are you guys, I did not get an email from you. So is there something that you are,
The Prezi,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
We can actually just honestly send you a copy. If you have a copy of that final checklist, that's completely fine to just use only that.
I have the Prezi open in a window right now, just online. Will that work?
It should, yes.
Okay, let's do that. All right.
And really, you can even just go straight down to the checklist because that's all we really have to cover after all the information everybody's shared so far.
Great. So this, I'll just introduce this really quick before Hayden takes over. So this is another tool that we still have a little bit of polishing work to do. But one thing that was suggested at a previous meeting is that might be useful for folks is actually a checklist that they can use as they walk around their property. And so here, I'll let Hayden take it from there.
Thank you. Yeah. So basically what our group was responsible for doing was just breaking down the ordinance, really reading through it and picking out all the important parts that you need to know about so that when you are evaluating your property and the fixtures that you have, you're able to really easily understand what meets the criteria already, what needs to change, and the easy steps you can take to do so. So we've pinpointed, first off, some standards. Essentially, lighting is only supposed to be used in any case for safety and for function. So lighting is always intentional. And there's specifics like no lighting over 3,000 Kelvin, and there can't be actually 1,000 lumens per acre that are unshielded for residences. Then acceptable applications of light, just examples of the times that you can light the outdoor of your house, or I guess applications of when you should light the outside of your house would be to illuminate a garage, to illuminate an entranceway, to illuminate a walkway and a path, or to illuminate a water feature. So specific examples of times where it'd be appropriate to use outdoor lighting on your house. The primary focus is retrofitting all of the fixtures that you have. So full cutoff fixtures are the main requirement. A lot of other groups have shown images of what those sort of fixtures look like, but those fixtures are all fully opaque on the top and sides, and there are no light sources that protrude from beneath those covers. So essentially, as long as the light and the source of the light does not go beneath the opaque cover and top, then, and it doesn't project any light at a more than 90-degree angle from the ground, then you're all good with your lights. There's a couple specific situations. So there's motion activated spotlights that are typically used in garage ways, and they are allowed to be used if they're pointed 45 degrees to the ground and are set on a timer for 15 minutes. They also have to be shielded to some degree, and ultimately that's a super specific case. So there's resources ready to further clarify that for you if needed. And then there's also pathway lights, which basically just can't be more than 18 inches tall, and they do have to be shielded as well. But there's a little bit more lenience towards those because they are important as well. And then there's specific exemptions for the holidays, holiday lighting. Christmas lights are always fun, so you're allowed to put those on your house. And lighting federal and state banners, flags, and also low voltage solar and LED lights are exempt to some degree from the ordinance. We have an image of some acceptable fixtures. I don't know if you have that, Kate, but all right. I think it may have been put in a previous presentation as well, but that information is available. That kind of cheat sheet showing examples of what is an acceptable light source or fixture and what isn't is on the Dark Sky Association's website.
Cool. And yeah, the final product will also include that image. I think it's actually the same image that is in the lighting ordinance.
Yes,
itself,
it is. It is
so.
it's on page 10 of the lighting ordinance or something like that.
Yeah.
That's on the flip side of this. Once this turns into the full mail out, this will arrive at your house or be available to you, and the rear side of this will have that full example sheet on the back of it.
Yeah, and it won't arrive anywhere except for as an online resource.
Okay, good to know.
Cool. Okay, well that is the finale. Sorry about that, clicked the wrong button. That is the finale of what we have to present to you all. I know we ran about 15 minutes over our intended time for the presentations, and I think we were planning to take a break before questions, but I'm totally happy to just keep going and to hear some questions at this point. And I think, Adrian, the plan was for you to have gathered and sorted questions for us, so I'm just gonna follow your lead at
Yeah,
this
that
point.
sounds good. I don't know, Anne, what do you think? I think maybe like a 5-minute break is okay, or do you want to keep going?
I personally would prefer to keep going given the time, but
Okay.
I'll leave it to you, Adrian, if you want to take a break.
No, I think that sounds good. If Kate could go and you're a go, let's do it. So we haven't had that many questions coming in through the chat, and again, I just like to review. You can enter your question in the chat. If you'd like to make a comment or question and take your mic off, then just put your full name into the chat. And then we'll also open it up at the end for people that are calling in on their phones. So the first question that we have is from Patrick McD. If I purchase low voltage outdoor lights that are dark sky approved by the International Dark Sky Association, is that sufficient to meet the Bluff Town requirements? And he added a link. Hayden wrote a response. It appears that all those fixtures are full cutoff, so I would say yes. I wasn't sure if any other students wanted to, or Kate wanted to add anything to that response.
Yeah, I would like to add something to that, actually. I think that approach is a really good start, and that will get you most of the way to being compliant with an ordinance such as what you all have in your town. However, I think that there are also some guidance on the total amount of light that is appropriate for a property. And so I would say that it's likely for, most of the most of the houses that I've seen in Bluff, that just a 1-to-1 swap with dark sky fixtures is likely sufficient. But the other thing that you will want to keep in mind is that if you have a property with 300 fixtures, even if all of those fixtures are, stamped with the IDA seal of approval, the total amount of light will still create some of those negative effects of light pollution, such as things like light trespass and things like that. So you also want to be mindful of just the total amount of artificial light that you're applying on the property. And also, most dark sky fixtures will automatically take care of the directionality of the light. But there are oftentimes some details in how they're installed that merit paying attention to as well, to ensure that the light is actually directed in a downward fashion and isn't angled in any way so that the light is doing things like crossing property boundaries or creating glare and stuff like that. So yeah, in summary with that, I would just say it's a really good start to start with those fixtures, but there are definitely a few other dimensions to consider when it comes to like the actual execution of achieving the compliance or just the efforts towards dark sky stuff.
Great, thank you. The second question is also from Patrick McD, and it is there a reason why the lighting assessment doesn't have any checkpoints on the west side? There are some potentially big light sources here. And I feel comfortable answering that question. We had sent out a request to the business owners of Bluff to see if there was any businesses interested in this lighting assessment. And then in the meantime, we had also chosen a public building in order to set an example because we have some public buildings that are not in compliance right now. And so that's the nature of how we chose. Jared had volunteered to collect the information for the survey. I think there definitely is an opportunity to do more lighting assessments on the west side. Ann or Sarah, do you want to add anything to that?
The only thing that I would add to the community is that this was obviously a voluntary exercise. It wasn't something that we were requiring businesses or homeowners to do. And so when Jared Barrett stepped up, that met the one requirement of having a business. And so we appreciate that.
Great. Question number 3. How do the hours ending at 8 p.m. for business to turn their lights off in Idaho affect the business operations? I'm sure most businesses are not actually closed at 8.
Yeah, sorry about that. For the most part, it was morely out in the sense of advertisement, not more so like public signs, like bar signs or restaurant signs. It was more so if there's like a billboard with lighting or whatnot, they would turn those off at a certain time, and then they could turn them back on after a certain time the next day. If that answers your question.
Jen, do you have any follow-up to that? If not, I'm going to move on. So our next question is from Wesley Shook. How do you measure light trespass, and what is the best way to see if you do have it?
I would say, a good way to assess light trespass or really any distribution of light, whether it's across property boundaries or not, is to use something like those illuminance meters that we talked about kind of halfway through. And the illuminance meter could be a device that you place in any place where you want to understand how much light is actually being received by that place. And so, I imagine that it could be used to determine something like light trespass by just measuring where light is falling across property boundaries. I think that one thing to keep in mind about the illuminance meters as a tool is that there's a lot of different options out there. There's even an app that I think was brought up in the last meeting. And the challenge with using things like apps, while I think that they're a really amazing tool to kind of get people thinking about things and taking relative measurements, they're not so great for taking absolute measurements of things like light because they aren't really highly calibrated. Everybody's phone camera is going to work a little bit differently and receive light a little bit differently, and so be translated as a slightly different measurement in something like those phone apps. I know that part of the discussion that had happened previously was some question about what other instruments the town might be interested in acquiring, and a calibrated illuminance meter is something that you might consider getting that would allow you to measure the incidence of light in different areas. So that could address things like trespass, but a number of other issues as well, or just, how the light is being distributed from any given fixture or property. So, and those range, there's really quite a range of them. I don't have like a particular model or anything to recommend right now, but they range in sort of the few $100 and up cost to get a calibrated one. Another thing that, could be considered is using consultants to do that kind of stuff.
Thank you. Luann Hook, will you please describe how and where we would use the SQM besides the timing of the moon and the Milky Way?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, that was a question about the location and timing of the SQM measurements. Is that right?
Yeah, what I'm wondering is, like, do you need to go out of town and shine it back, or do you just go to you just step outside your door and shine it up at the sky? Or I'm just kind of wondering what it catches, and if you have to move around town, or what building you stand by, like, kind of that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And actually, sky quality meter measurements are only going to be legit if you follow a very specific protocol. So I'm glad you're asking that question. So the first thing to know about the sky quality meter itself is that it really is only designed to measure sky glow. And that means that you do need to move away from any point sources of light. In other words, glare affects the sky quality meter just as it affects our eyes. And so the way that the sky quality meter works is on the little side of it, and I can actually take us back to the slide where the students had shown it. Okay, you guys seeing the slide there?
Mm-hmm.
Great. So yeah, on the side of that instrument that's kind of that's kind of facing us, you see like a little greenish lens. That is just a lens with a photo sensor, and the lens is actually something that is designed to capture a 10-degree cone of area, and that's basically how this thing is calibrated to work. So it captures a lighting measurement of this 10-degree cone, and the idea is that 10-degree cone should be pointed directly up, and it should be you should be far away enough from any of those point light sources so that they're not directly influencing the measurement that's being received by that 10-degree cone. And so, locations that they don't need to be like out of town entirely, but they definitely need to be in places where there's no obstruction to that 10-degree cone as you point the device directly upwards. And they should also, be away from town lighting, and also not be like right next to any cliffs, because that can also impact, or under trees or anything like that. Any sort of obstruction of what you're actually measuring or hoping to measure, which is, again, that reflected light bouncing around in the atmosphere, any obstruction like that can impact the readings and bias the readings. So definitely places that have more open horizons, aren't obscured in any way by vegetation, and are away from those point sources of light is kind of the guidance that I would give of where you should go. And you might choose places that have different elevations too, because I know that at Bluff is kind of down at basically the river elevation, but you might also, you might choose a variety of locations, some that represent that elevation of most of the town, maybe some that are actually on the cliffs above Bluff as well, and that can help you determine sort of the full landscape of what the sky glow looks like in and around the town.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. So the last question that we have in the chat right now is from Stuart Atchison. Does a string of party lights that is illuminated short-term for outdoor events fit into Bluff's ordinance? Is something like that allowed for evening parties? So I wonder if that's a P&Z question.
Yeah, I can try to answer it. So Stuart, there's nothing specifically preventing this unless you say that it falls underneath holiday lighting, which would be kind of your twinkle lighting. We talked a lot about whether or not to write something specific for this. And I think planning and zoning kind of just left it as, so long as your lights are not always on and they really are just every once in a while in the evenings for your parties, I don't think it would be a big deal. But if your lights are always illuminated, it's like 2 a.m. and your lights are on every night, that I think would fall into a nuisance. And that's kind of how we've addressed this. Did I make that muddier for you, Stuart?
No response in the chat. Stuart, feel free to turn on your mic if you'd like. Nope, he's good. Thank you, Sarah. And now, great. Patrick says this was good info. Thanks very much, everyone. We're over by 1 minute. I just wanted to reach out, and is it okay to see, is anyone on the phone want to ask a comment or ask a question or make a comment? Looks like we're all set. Great. Well, thank you, Kate, and your classroom for joining us. And do you have anything else you'd like to add?
No, just a big thank you from Bluff. We really appreciate it. It's been very helpful, at least to get us started. And I'm sure you'll be hearing more from us as we muddy our way through the next 6 months. Thank you.
And I'll just add that we will make the slides available, and as well as the lighting assessment spreadsheet for people to use and the homeowner checklist. So stay tuned for that information for residents.
Thank you guys so much. It was great.
You know, I have one other comment, and Sarah, there's some confusion, I think, on whether or not our ordinance has been enacted. But what we have done is enacted the ordinance, and it's just the grandfathering in part that we're delaying the enforcement on. So any new lighting, any new building that comes in is restricted to the ordinance, and anybody that sells property complies with the ordinance. So the ordinance has been in place and has been adopted, but we're just, working on getting existing buildings up to speed.
Thanks for that clarification, Luann. Kate, were you going to add something?
I was just going to say thank you back to everybody. And it's really an honor and a pleasure to be able to be involved with your efforts. I know there's a lot of challenges and things to work out. And I will just add that every lighting ordinance or every dark sky effort that I've seen has had similar types of challenges. So you guys are definitely not alone in these efforts. And but I do think that you all are really being like, you're on the frontier and you're working through this stuff, and it's really awesome to see. So I'm just really excited to see what the future holds for you all in terms of managing this nighttime landscape. And I'm really happy and definitely think that it's so valuable, even as someone who does not live in Bluff, that there are places like the town of Bluff that people can still go to see what the night sky even is, or experience what a dark night even is, or sleep in an actually dark environment, because that is just something that's so rare for people across the world these days. So yeah, thank you again for involving us, and I'll be happy to hear from you some more.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Thanks a lot. I'm turning everything off.
Mm-hmm.